So you're dating someone. You're really interested into this person. You're really into them. And they seem like they're really into you. And yet, you see some red flags here and there. And you wonder, should I be paying attention to those? Are those big deals? Or should I just kind of be patient and overlook those? It's really a hard call to make. Or maybe you're not dating anyone right now, but you'd like to be, and you really wonder, how can I know the future? How can I know if I find someone that's really going to make me happy, or that we're going to be happy together? These are the things that the research about couples relationships have addressed, and we're going to look at those in today's episode. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin. Welcome to the Steps and Tools for Emotional Intelligence podcast. In today's episode, we're going to look at what John Gottman has called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of a relationship, meaning that there are 4 types of interactions that couples can have with each other that predict that their relationship is going to either go well or not go well. Now, obviously, it's not that simple. However, it's amazing how these 4 areas of communication, just by themselves, can predict whether a relationship is going to make it or not. And so, when you're thinking about all the different things that might trouble you, or little irritations in a relationship, and you're wondering about how seriously to take all that, it's really good to have a roadmap that tells you, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, this is not a big deal. Now this is really a big deal. That's what these 4 horsemen can do for you. It's like having a crystal ball for your relationship, because if people don't know how to deal with these 4 areas of communication, according to more than 40 years of research at the University of Washington by John Gottman and his colleagues, that relationship isn't likely to make it. And in fact, they've been able to predict with a high degree of certainty that couples who have these 4 horsemen in their communication patterns are not going to be together in 6 years. So it makes sense to know what they are, and usually people start thinking about this when they have hit their first rough patch in their relationship, after they get married, or after they live together, or after they're committed. But my thought is, and that's the purpose of this episode, is why not move that up? Why not be thinking about these characteristics of communication when you're actually dating someone? Because this is going to be a predictor of how happy you are together, and even whether you'll still be able to make it together. So what are these 4 horsemen that can predict the end of a relationship? The 4 horsemen, or these 4 characteristics of communication, are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Now let's unpack what each of these means. Now, criticism is probably best understood in contrast to a complaint, a respectful complaint. You know, when you want to speak respectfully to your boss or a colleague or anyone, there's a certain tone you use, but also the way you word things conveys that you're asking for something that you need, that you're asking for the person to change something about what they do to meet your need. So, it would really help me if you remembered to take out the trash. It would really help me if you greeted me when I walk in the door. I really need that. It would really help me if I knew that when I called you, you took my calls and didn't put them to voicemail. All right, these are just examples of complaints, but they're not criticism. And they don't attack the person's character. An example of criticism would be whenever I call you, you just don't pick up. What's wrong with you? That's an example of criticism. Now, contempt is the second predictor of relationship problems. And contempt takes criticism to a new level. It's not only that you're attacking the person's character and saying, you always do this, it's just like you to do this, but it adds the sarcasm, it adds the arrogance of looking down on the person, talking down to them as if they're a child, and speaking to them with derision. This is what contempt is. And I often tell couples when I do couples counseling, after the first session, I say, one of the first things that you can do to improve your relationship, like starting today, is just eliminate sarcasm from your talking with each other. I'm aware of all the protests of, what I have a dry sense of humor, that's part of how I express humor. But honestly, if both people aren't laughing, it's not funny, and it shouldn't be funny to the couple. So one of the quickest ways to get rid of contempt is at least to start getting rid of it, is to be able to recognize sarcasm that has an edge, and to stop using it in your communication with each other. But the hallmark of contempt, as opposed to criticism, is that contempt has this element of looking down on the person, of talking down to them as if you're in a better place. And you wouldn't think that's such a big deal, because doesn't that come up all the time in conversation? Well, sadly, yes, it does, but it doesn't feel good, and it tends to create a response in the other person that is really what the third horseman is, and that's defensiveness. So when you feel criticized, or when you feel like someone is expressing contempt towards you, what are you most likely to respond with? Well, your first response is most likely going to be defensiveness. It's going to be hard for you to listen to what the other person is saying and take it in and make some kind of change that's positive when all you can think about is defending yourself. So defensiveness is maybe one of the trickiest ones to recognize, because defensiveness is so much a part of conversation all around. And so we're used to it, and we think that it's not that big of a deal. And in some ways, it's true that we all are defensive, and that does not mean that our relationships are going downhill just because once in a while we're defensive. But if defensiveness is what characterizes your relationship with the person you're dating, and in your response to them or their response to you, then that's a big warning flag. And it's a warning flag that has a long history of science on its side. It's worth taking a good look at. Now, the fourth horseman is kind of an extension of defensiveness. The fourth horseman is called stonewalling. And what stonewalling is, what it looks like is, let's say you're talking to your partner and you're arguing, and they just look down to the floor and they just stop responding to you, and they seem to not listening anymore. They've just disengaged from the conversation, or they look away, or they look right at you with this glassy-eyed stare, and they've just shut down and disengaged. That's stonewalling, and it usually happens because someone is overwhelmed with the emotion of the conversation. The Gottmans call this flooding, and it's a good word for it, because if you ever driven a car, an older car that gets flooded when you try to give it more gas, you're just worsening the condition. You have to wait and take a break for the gasoline to dry up, and then you can try to start the engine again for the car. So we often get flooded with emotion, and without taking a break, we will get to the place where we're defensive, and at a later point, when defensiveness doesn't seem to protect us, we just shut down and become disengaged from the conversation, and we're stonewalling. So these four Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, these are the big weeds that grow in the garden of relationships. And when you look out on the garden and you see different things that you're concerned about, you've got to make sure that you pay attention to these four big weeds. Because if they don't get taken out of the garden, if they don't get attention and replaced with something good, then your relationship is most likely going to have some trouble spots, if not worse. So, how do you evaluate this? Well, there are at least three different ways that I think are important to do this in a dating relationship, or if you're not even, you can do some of this before you're even are in a relationship. The first is you need to understand the four horsemen, and this takes some reading. Reading some of the Gottman books. One of the bestseller that John Gottman wrote is The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And just to read through those and think about applying what you're reading to the kind of communication you have with someone you're dating. How do you handle tense moments? How do you handle disagreements? What kinds of things are said? Most of the time, here's where I think couples really get confused and they miss the ball, is that they're standing at home plate and they're ready to take the pitch, and what they're swinging for is they want to know that they're right. They want to prove that they're right, and they want to establish that they are heard rather than listening to what the other person is saying. And they miss the point that what really may be going on there is the way in which they're talking about the issue, regardless of who's right, is really the thing that matters. So the first thing is to learn about them and become familiar enough with these four characteristics that you can spot them in other people, you can spot them in yourself, you can spot them in different types of interactions, whether it's in business or in shopping or in a relationship or with parents or children, colleagues, you name it. These things come up all the time, and if you get good at recognizing them, it really helps you when you begin to think about dating someone to see, does this person communicate in a way that's going to feel good to me 10 years from now? And are they on that road? Now, part of that learning curve is if you are in a dating relationship, this can be something that you both actually talk about, and it kind of becomes part of your adventure to get to know each other and to experience life, is to kind of talk about what makes for good communication. This is what emotional intelligence is all about when it comes to couples, is that you want to be able to have an ongoing conversation about what makes for a healthy interaction between you, regardless of who was right during the last argument or the last disagreement. If you both are in agreement that these things are important and you talk about them from time to time, and you're able to analyze your argument together on the basis of these four horsemen, you're going to find that things go a lot better and that you're a lot happier with your ability to resolve things. Now, a second way that you can work with this, with the four horsemen, is learn how your partner responds to people in different situations and circumstances. So you don't want to just spend all your time being alone, just the two of you, because you really aren't going to get to know that person unless you see how they respond to their friends, to your friends, to colleagues. How do they talk about people who aren't around? And how do they interact with people? And when you see them with a variety of situations and people, you get a much more accurate view of how they're going to actually be talking to you one day when the thrill of the chase has worn off. Now, a third way to really work with these four horsemen in a dating relationship is to pay attention to stressful situations that you find yourself into together as a couple. Someone once said that, your relationship needs to experience all four seasons in order to be kind of vetted and to be confident that it's going to work. And the season of winter corresponds to the time of stress where things are difficult and you're just kind of pushing through to try to keep the relationship going. And it helps when you can see your partner in a stressful situation, either with their family, their job, things aren't going well for them, and you see how they talk to people and how they talk to you when they're under stress. Now, I'm not advocating the idea that we go around with a checklist and then just kind of eliminate people because they said the wrong thing. This is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we need to have a higher level of discernment and awareness of how these patterns weave in and out of conversations, and to be able to get a more realistic assessment of how the person that we are caring about, how they really talk to people and how they listen to people, or how they don't listen to people, how they criticize, how they're defensive, that sort of thing, because this is what you're going to be living with if you hitch your wagon to this person. These are three ways that you can work with the four horsemen, but I would say that, and this is probably the punchline of this whole episode, is that the real benefit is in looking at yourself and starting to see how you communicate. And when you start to work on yourself and you start to become more self-aware, which is an important part of emotional intelligence, and then you're able to modify the way you express yourself to people, and you can try new things, and you can learn over time how to be a good listener, how to be a better listener, how to be less defensive when someone confronts you, how to raise an issue or a complaint without criticizing or expressing contempt. And you can find that you just have a lot more confidence in how you communicate. And when you join together with someone else and you begin to have a shared adventure of learning how to really have the best communication you can together, and that becomes part of the journey you have as a couple, then you're really on your way to something sweet and good that's going to last. I hope that you've found this useful, and I'm Dr. Greg Hamlin. Thanks for listening.